Korey Lee is our guest speaker today from the South China Morning Post. And Korey will guide us through the SCMP experience in using AI to understand better and engage more and better with customers using, again, AI and machine learning. So we're now ready to go. So I'm very happy to welcome Korey, which now should appear on your screen. Korey, thanks so much for being with us. I know it's a rather particular hour to be online, so an extra thank you from me and the team for being with us online. And the floor is yours, and I'm really looking forward to this presentation. And obviously after that, we will get with the Q&A with the audience, and we'll get started. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me. It's an honor to be here. Can you guys hear me okay? Yeah, okay. All right, so today I want to share with you a little bit more about how we've built the data culture with AI at the South China Morning Post and how we've really tried to humanize data with user personas. So in case you're unfamiliar with the brand, unfamiliar with SCMP, here's a quick overview of our history. I'm not going to go through every point, so it would take me the entire time I have today to go through that. But just here's a quick summary of what we've done, where we've been, and where we're going over the past 117 some odd years. We are a Hong Kong-based newspaper. I'm based in Hong Kong normally. I'm in California at the moment, so it's 3 a.m. here, so forgive me if I'm a little delirious. But we do have readers all over the world. And even though we are a Hong Kong-based newspaper, and we have a digital presence in Hong Kong, we've expanded, and 95% of our readership actually comes from outside of Hong Kong. So we are very much an international brand as well. Our vision at SCMP is really to elevate thought, and our mission is to lead the global conversation about China. One of the things that I think we led with very early on was that transformation comes through culture, and much like data, I think transformation in data also we must lead with culture. So I think that was one of the fundamental things that came through, was that it's really important to give people a reason to come to work, and part of that is to lead the global conversation on China. So how do we humanize data? One of the things that we've done over the course of the past 6 to 9 months is work on personas, and build personas as a representation of our readership. So as some of you may know, a persona is an archetypal description and a humanistic story around an individual customer, not simply what they do or how they do it, but also, and perhaps most importantly, why. A good persona provides context, is relevant, and most importantly, perhaps, is actionable. So personas are distilled from really helping us better understand our audiences and serve as a bridge between SCMP and our audience and our readership. We want to understand why they're coming, right? What's their goal and motivation for coming to SCMP? How can we help them? What's their intent when they're coming? How do they find us? What are the touch points which they come through? What are the different channels or funnels? Do they come through social? Do they come through? Do they come direct to our site? Did a friend send them a link of an article? How often do they come? How, what means by which, and each time they come, how many articles do they read? Do they prefer bite-sized content? Do they prefer in-depth content? Who are they? What's their, how old are they approximately? What gender? What industry do they work in? What do they do during their day job? What do they do for fun? What do they consume in SCMP? What types of articles are they reading? What section? What desk? What topics? What content format? Is it infographics? Is it video? Is it long form? And where do they come from geographically? Hong Kong, Singapore, US, Europe, and when do they usually visit us? Is it a commuting habit, or is it a recreational habit on the weekends? Where, why, who, where, when, why, how, what? So we really we sought to answer all of these questions through personas. We built this not only on quantitative data, but also enriched this with qualitative data. So we work together with our product team and our audience growth team, which is our marketing team, to really put this together. So our first step was really identifying the different attributes, behavioral and off of surveys, to understand who these users were, and really explore the business needs across each of these departments. Our product team, which is developing the UI and UX that our customers and our readers interact with on a daily basis, and then of course for marketing, for acquisition and retention. The second step was really segmentation, so using data aggregation for behavioral data, and leveraging machine learning to really profile these different segments. So here's where we started to actually separate these users and cluster them. And then finally, bringing these segments to life. So personification of these different segments and these identified segments, really understanding the why and deep diving into segment characteristics. So what we did here was we actually took the data and then interviewed, had several dozen user interviews with with readers from each cluster that we had, to really understand and get inside their psyche, to understand, what are they reading, why are they coming to us, and we actually have some quotes later on that came out of these interviews, which are actually very, very insightful. So we've identified 6 personas with varying engagement and subscription levels. And the size of the bubbles that you see here are actually relative to the size of the personas in terms of our overall audience. So we have 6 personas, start from the left. So that's the lifestyle news seekers. We have our variety seekers, and we'll go into each of these in depth. But from left to right, you'll actually see that there's a variance in the number of articles that they're viewing. In this case, we just launched our paywall back in August, so we're looking at it from articles viewed behind the paywall, from low to high, and then the number of people that actually converted in terms of subscribers. So looking at their subscription potential as well. And we realized through doing this exercise and this analysis that SCMP actually means different things to each persona. Right, so our lifestyle news seekers, they're low engagement, some subscription potential actually, and the variety seekers, a little higher engagement, very low subscription potential, and each of them has different hot buttons, and so they're engaging with us in different ways and really reading us for different reasons. And again, I'm going to go through each of these personas in depth, so I'm not going to spend too much time on this slide. Our first group is our lifestyle news seekers. And so one of the feedback that we got from this group is that they're coming for K-pop content, and they wanted more of it. So we did this about 6 months ago, and more recently we've actually ramped up our K-pop and our kind of lifestyle news coverage in that area, because it's been a very popular area with our readers, and we realized this through doing this persona analysis. So they come to SCMP to really get in touch with what's happening in the world, to be in the know. They're not as interested in hard news, but a lot of these readers are actually coming from the US, from Canada, from the UK, and from Australia. Mix of male and female, mostly younger, so typically below age 35. And they come about once a month and read a few articles and spend not too much time with us. Not very many newsletter subscribers, not too many of them logged in, and not too many of them on mobile or sharing articles. So relatively low engagement levels, right? And we wanted to look at all these different dimensions to really understand how these users are actually engaging with us. And as we'll see, as we'll go through these other 5 personas, that there's quite a bit of variance across all of these different groups. The second group we have represents a little bit more diversity. So the intent behind this group is to really make their own views heard by leveraging and reading multiple free news sources. So the operative word here being free, because these folks were a little bit more reluctant to pay. So the folks we interviewed actually mentioned that they actually enjoy writing their own commentaries on LinkedIn, their own analysis of the news to kind of improve their self-brand. Right? They want to be known as someone who understands the news, understands the world, and is able to represent that through social media. So these readers are a mix of Singaporean, Malaysian, Hong Kong, as well as American. And skews a little bit older, so now they're 35 to 54, still majority male. coming roughly once a week, reading three plus articles, and reading in typical average time, about 1 to 2 minutes each visit. As you'll see, there's a much higher engagement with newsletters, so we're up to almost 16%. There's some app downloads as well, so folks on app actually engage much more with us. For those of you guys who work in the news business and know mobile app engagement is multiple times over what you'll typically see on site, desktop, or even on mobile. There's some of these users are also logged in, and more of them are sharing. Sometimes these users will actually share through their own social media platforms rather than use our sharing buttons. So they'll copy the link over rather than using the buttons themselves. So we lose a little bit there in terms of the tracking, but an interesting type of engagement. And so we call these folks the variety seekers. The next group kind of comes up to the professional reason. So I have to read SCMP for work. So these are the inquisitive professionals. So these guys are keeping pace with what's happening in China, and also perhaps working with China directly in some capacity professionally. So they need to be enriched in terms of being a China expert in terms of their work. Sometimes they work in a lot of these folks are in finance and running investments in China. Or they're perhaps working in education and need to teach their students about China. A mix of readers from Southeast Asia, from Hong Kong again, and from the US. So these folks are reading a little bit more now, and you'll see the numbers there on the bottom right, subscribing to more newsletters and actually engaging more with us through logins, through mobile app, and also sharing a bit more here as well. They do prefer, the content has also shifted, right? So in the beginning, you'll remember the lifestyle news seekers, the lifestyle seekers were more into the brief intro and tech or multimedia. So a lot more interactive graphics and video. These folks are much more into our in-depth analysis, right? Perhaps political economy type content. In text. And so we see them reading different sections as well. They're reading Hong Kong news, China news, Asia, and This Week in Asia is actually another one of our sections that does in-depth analysis on what's happening in the Southeast Asia region. Global connectors are an entirely different demographic as well, which is also quite interesting. So these guys actually just want to stay up to date. A lot of these folks live overseas, perhaps from Hong Kong. They may be natively born in Hong Kong, but then moved away from Hong Kong. So they're away from home, but want to keep in touch with home, and they want to share with their friends and family about what's happening. So you see actually the share ratio in the bottom right corner here jumped to almost 10%. I think these folks by far share the most and are advocates for our content, which is great. They're subscribing to newsletters. Again, the form has shifted again from in-depth and text to a mix of text and multimedia, as well as a shorter form content. The folks tend to skew a bit in the mid-range, age-wise, 35 to 54, and consume quite a bit of content. So four articles a week, roughly, and about 2 minutes a visit. So they're coming quite frequently, or 4 articles each visit, sorry, and visit every other day. So these guys are coming quite frequently, and they're sharing, which is, as for any media brand, a great asset, right? So we want to see more and more of these users come in. The next folks really come for updates, right? So their intent is perhaps curiosity, but they want to know what's happening. So they're reading Hong Kong news, China news, but also world news. One of the folks that we interviewed says, now that I live in Hong Kong, I need to keep myself up to date on what's happening in China, and really just to understand what's going on here for my own knowledge. So most of these readers are coming from Hong Kong. We see a slight increase in age here as well. So they're 50% actually age 45, and then a lot of them working in the education, government, and technology sectors, coming quite frequently, twice a week at least, and reading quite a number of articles, about 7 articles each time they come, spending quite a bit of time with us. And as you can see, the biggest number down here is actually the mobile app download. So they're quite engaged with us. They have us on their phones all the time. So this is a highly engaged user who actually wants regular updates on what's happening in Hong Kong. So this is one of our local readers, but we also have some folks coming from Singapore and Malaysia. The reserved local is our last group. So they really read news to understand what's going on in the world and also gain perspective. This group is quite interesting. 8% of them are actually retired, so it does skew a bit older. And they're, again, reading the similar mix of content to the last group, but they also want to understand, they primarily want to understand Hong Kong, but also a little bit about the world too. So these folks are primarily reading Hong Kong local content and wanting to get that in depth and in text format. This by far is our highest mobile app download or mobile app user, and quite a few of them almost a quarter of them are actually logged in on a regular basis. So they're getting customized content recommendations, they're subscribed to newsletters, and they're really getting kind of the full works of what we have to offer. And they're reading quite a bit, hundreds of articles every month on some of these users, coming in almost every other day. In some cases, some of these guys come in, and read us every single day. So we're their go-to source for news. So what we've learned from all this after going through these 6 personas is that we need to approach each of these personas with distinct strategies, and we need to have a specific frame of reference and frame of mind for reaching out and engaging with each of these readers. So understanding their variant engagement levels as well as their subscription potential will lead us to potentially not messaging a lifestyle news seeker or a variety seeker perhaps about subscriptions yet. Maybe we just want to get them to subscribe to a newsletter. Right? It's too early to talk about subscription. We actually might even just want to get them to return. A number of our lifestyle news seekers might only come once or twice, and then we might not see them again. So getting them to log in, getting them to subscribe to a newsletter, getting them to engage with us in a more meaningful way is really what we're trying to achieve. And then as we kind of move down to the Inquisitive Professional, these guys are a bit more sensitive, so that what we found is they're only going to subscribe if it's actually critical to their work or to their job. And we can kind of boost the stickiness of SCMP by making it more of a habit to come every day. So yes, you have to come for work and read the news to understand and be better at your job. But let's make that a little more engaging, right? So thinking of different ways to do that and engage with them. The global connector is reading us through the app and finding a breaking news. So now we can start to talk about subscription. And in these last 3 cohorts, right, across the global connector, the China, Hong Kong Curious, as well as the reserved local. And there's different ways to approach each of these because they're using us for different reasons. The global connector wants to share. So, making sharing as easy as possible and as seamless as possible, perhaps localizing the sharing buttons for different markets. For example, Facebook is quite popular in the Philippines as a sharing platform, whereas WhatsApp is much more popular in Hong Kong. So we might want to put those at the top of the sharing kind of options for each of those countries, just to make it easier for these folks to share and spread the word if they like an article. And really for certain markets, it's actually to alleviate the concern of value for money. So maybe thinking about specific pricing in different markets where the median income might be a little bit lower in certain markets, especially in Southeast Asia. For the China Hong Kong Curious app push notifications, since these users are using apps so heavily, we might want to come back. We might want to send out push notifications to get them to come back, and this can boost their engagement several times. We test different app push notifications throughout to specific audiences, and we see very different engagement levels depending on what topics we push and what types of users we push these topics to. And we think there's a high potential for subscription within this group as well. And then finally, the reserved local. This is our super engaged audience, which definitely welcome subscription. So we're aiming to convert as many of these as possible. And many of them actually have already hit our paywall. So we have to figure out how to retarget and re-engage them if they've kind of fallen off. So again, just to recap, this is really taking a different approach with each of these types of users is really important to how we engage them and how we keep them coming back, right? Because everybody is coming for something a little bit different. And internally, fundamentally, personas actually serve and benefit multiple functions within the organization. So for advertising and marketing group, or marketing solutions group, which runs a brand studio and several other things, we want to do data enrichment to actually kind of power 1+X is a data platform that we use to basically better understand our audiences. And so we'll actually touch on this a little bit in our later presentation, on my team's presentation this week on Lighthouse. So I don't want to spoil the surprise there. So I'm going to leave that for now and move on to audience growth. So audience growth is our marketing team, or audience growth team, as we like to call them internally. And it's really understanding how to engage the user from the first touch point, whether they're coming to us for the first time, all the way through to subscription, right? As the user kind of goes through the life cycle, their user journey with SCMP, how do we engage with them in more meaningful ways? And how do we provide them more persuasive messaging, content, creative, that they're actually interested in and that they're coming back to read? For editorial, it's being more empathetic and understanding who we're actually writing for, right? How do they optimize channel distribution? Are there certain things that we want to post on certain social platforms that we'll know will reach a different persona, a different demographic? And how can we engage effectively? How can we use mobile app push notifications? They shouldn't just go out to everybody that's using the app at once. Perhaps it's geo-specific or persona-specific, so that, again, users in certain demographics and certain cohorts are actually getting the content that they want. And then with our product team, it's really helping to build empathy towards new products, new designs, prioritizing different product features, again, for different personas, and crafting and building different audience segments from throughout the entire journey, right? So for the lifestyle seeker, maybe they're not even ready for a newsletter. So maybe we want to actually just get them to come back or read another article. So each user might have a different objective to get them kind of farther down the engagement chain. The application of personas is, this is, for me, the most interesting part. And really, how do we actually leverage personas? And then we've created engagement scores, which, again, we'll talk a little bit later about in the loyalty presentation that my team's put together on Thursday, I believe, about engagement retention. But there are several ways to engage with the user. And I think, again, for each of these personas, we have to engage with them in different ways. Maybe that's through newsletter, maybe that's through a call to action on site to check out our podcast or to check out a different section. Maybe it's a bottom an end of article ad to check out our conference that's coming up. Maybe a poll to ask where are you going for vacation? Would you send your kids abroad for studies? And really, we've left this to our teams to come up with ideas as well. How can we engage with these different personas in meaningful ways and tailor specific messaging to each of these different groups? And we find that engagement really does need to evolve over time, right? So we've done this engagement scoring, creating these personas, and then really what we want to continue to build, and what we've started building already, actually, we're somewhere between the green and the yellow at this point, but really apply these personas to in-house ads, to newsletters, actually package this into an engine to actually run daily scoring across these different breakdowns and map these users, which I'll talk about a little bit later in this presentation, so that we can use them for not only in-house ads, but also external acquisition and retargeting of lookalike users, as well as retargeting existing users that haven't come back for a while. We do want to validate this performance as well, right? Do A/B testing to actually make sure that this is in line with what we're seeing across other cohorts with recirculation, newsletter signups, subscription rates, so on and so forth. And then really implement these tests, the tests that are successful, and then iterate upon them. So go back and kind of rinse and repeat, perhaps even revisit the personas as we grow and change and our audience demographic changes. We need to revisit the personas again, and maybe interview more readers to understand. Our reader demographics are constantly changing, so in a few years, in a few months, perhaps we might even need to redo this exercise. And so this isn't something that is permanent per se, but there's something that it's constantly iterated upon. And where we see successes, we want to implement those and then continue to iterate on those successes over time. And perhaps expand to even more segments, perhaps within the reserved local, or perhaps within the inquisitive professional, there's actually subsegments. Maybe it's not just finance and education. Maybe there's someone in another industry, another sector that's interested in us too. So really understanding these personas are really just starting to scratch the surface, and really understanding them more in depth at a subsegment level will make for a lot of fascinating opportunities. So we've listed out a ton of potential applications here. These are some of the things we suggested to our team internally. So it's everything from very basic ads, some generic posts on the acquisition side, because we don't really know who these users are yet at the very top of funnel. For once they're getting a little bit farther down into the community engagement side, then we can start to encourage them to log in, maybe read a comment or comment themselves after they've logged in. Subscription ads, maybe once they're a little bit farther along the engagement chain and they're coming back again and again, maybe some newsletter signups tailor-made to whatever content they're reading. If they're more focused on K-pop and the lifestyle content, then maybe we can tailor something to that. On the retention side, we really want maybe a we miss you message, please come back, we want you to read us again. And as we get towards revenue, we really want to provide different subscription incentives, right? We found that even though we're very early in the subscription game, and I'm learning a lot from my peers as part of this Journalism and AI Festival, as well as all the conversations that we've had leading up to it, is that people subscribe for different reasons. For some it's cause-based, for others it's to get the information they need, for others it's work. So again, understanding our users in a more in-depth and a more meaningful way really helps us to send them the right message, and to help them engage with us in a more meaningful and a more substantial way. So getting down to the nitty-gritty and the very practical pieces, this is how we've actually implemented some of the scoring models. So we'll do cookie mapping. These are actually sample GA cookies, Google Analytics cookies, and we'll basically map this user. As soon as they come in, we'll map them to an engagement group, an engagement score based on whatever they've done previously, and then what persona they fall into. So typically we actually remap these users on a persona basis. I think we map them once a month, and then on engagement score, we actually remap them every day. So based on what they've done over the past 30 days, 30 to 60 days. So if we see that they're a flyby and they might not have a record or a previous record, so they look like a new customer or new reader, then and their engagement score is relatively low because they're new, we might prompt them to log in or sign up for a newsletter or just read another article, right? So this action item down below is perhaps variable, right? So maybe it's not login, but maybe it's check out our newsletter. For a user who has come back many times, right, and falls into a higher score, higher level engagement score, we actually want them to maybe we want to prompt them to subscribe, or maybe take another action, right? You make a comment or share this article. Again, depending on what user cohort and persona they fall into. We've also integrated these user segments into Google Analytics to make it easy for even our non-techie, non-data colleagues to access on a regular basis. So we've made these into segments within Google Analytics, so they can actually see and kind of do analysis for themselves. We're big believers in data democracy at SCMP. So we want everybody within the company to really have access to the information they need to better do their jobs. And this enables them to actually access these personas in real time, and it's updated daily, so they can see how many of their users that are reading this particular article are coming from a certain country or coming through a certain channel, and really understand this type of information in depth. So this is really, I think, important to applying and practically driving actions through the data that for all these different personas that we've set up. And then one of the next applications is really importing or exporting these segments into into Google Ad Manager or DFP or any ad platform, Trade Desk, any ad exchange, DFP or whatnot. So actually taking these audiences and then applying them to um, other platforms where we can reacquire. We can create lookalike audiences similar to the existing ones. So once we know that we have a specific target persona we want to acquire, we can take these personas out to different platforms and actually acquire more of these users or win back some of the users that we might have lost over time. So I think this next step really practically helps our marketing team, our audience growth team to improve how they engage with our users over time. So that's all I have for today, but welcome any questions from all of you.
Thank you so much, Korey, for the insightful presentation. I mean, I was just taking down so many notes, but luckily we have loads of questions both on Telegram and on the YouTube channel. So my questions will have to take a backseat. So let's go through them first. First of all, for everybody who's following, thanks so much for the questions you already put. Keep sending them in the next few minutes, both in the comments on the live stream on YouTube or on our Telegram channel. The team is monitoring both to get the questions. And Korey, I guess I'll start with Flor, who you know well, where this question comes from. Of course, she was interested in knowing a little bit more, and I know you will expand in your collab session on Thursday, but maybe just to give us an idea on the behind the scenes of where does machine learning come in? What's the key contribution that machine learning gives to this process that you have described?
Sure. I think machine learning came in primarily when we were doing the clustering of these users. There's actually quite a, let me flip over to the appendix. There's tons of underlying data that's feeding into this. So I've kind of simplified it for the sake of making it easy to digest in a presentation. And this only highlights some of the different dimensions that actually comes in. So really understanding which of these dimensions was more causal or effective in driving user retention, user engagement over time took a lot of, it's something that we basically applied machine learning to and ran through dozens of different models in order to figure out which of these is actually the best fit. How many clusters should we actually have, right? What's the right number of segments? We landed at 6 through, we iterated on this dozens of times. So we went from, I think, as low as 3 all the way up to 20, 20 being just not practical for business purposes. But yeah, primarily it was really about segmenting and clustering the users is where we applied the machine learning.
That's good. So I guess I sense from the crowd what would be interesting to understand is in what way machine learning is specifically what allows you to get value in there? As in, was there different techniques that could have allowed you to get to the same information, but maybe just slower? So is machine learning providing speed or only, or is it maybe, or scale as well? Or is it just about that it allows you to do things that you would not be able to do otherwise with other tools?
I think it's speed, scale, and accuracy. And perhaps I think all of those are important. I mean, we're talking about tens of millions of users, and with them, all their behavioral data points, right? So especially with more loyal and engaged users, that multiplies out to tens of billions, if not trillions, of engagement kind of events and whatnot. So making sense of that and distilling that down into something that's actually actionable for the business within a few months is actually, well, that was our greatest challenge, was like, okay, how do we make sense of all this? How do we make use of all this, and then tie it back into something that's actually helpful to our newsroom, that we can sit down with our editors and go through and distill it into something that everybody would understand, and that we could talk about and have conversations about and debates, like, oh, I think this article would be great for the Inquisitive Professional, and this one might not be so good for our reserve local. So we can start to have conversations like that, which makes it much more interesting. But I think it is an abstraction of a lot of data and several months of work by not only, I can't take all the credit for this. Certainly, it's a massive team that's actually driving this.
Wonderful, thank you. Let me follow up exactly on that, because there were a couple of questions, both from Heino on YouTube and Lin He on the Telegram channel exactly about the conversations that you were describing. So I guess there are questions from a newsroom perspective. Was it challenging? Was it difficult to have the buy-in from the newsroom, from editorial, about changing maybe their practices or the kind of output they put out as a result of these personas information that you got? And in general, I think they're interested in understanding how was this data that you showed to us now presented to the editors in a way that they could understand and make decisions upon.
Yeah, this is still a work in progress. So we've only launched these, I think, three or 4 months ago. So I actually shared a very similar presentation to this with a little bit more detail and specifics on the numbers to our newsroom. And we've done several sessions, I think, over the course of the past few months across the organization. So this is not just meant for editorial, but also for, as I mentioned before, our advertising team, for our marketing, for product. And so it's really across the organization. And I think part of building, the reason why I kind of titled this, changing data culture, transforming data culture, is really that it requires a lot of time. It requires a lot of education, right? As to, what is a persona? Why should I care about this? Why does it matter to me? And I think we have a lot of those conversations. Like if we better understand our user and we can better understand who's actually reading this article, then we can potentially get more of those readers, right? None of our editors really write with the intent to not be read. So of course they want as many people as possible to read their article. So let's figure out who wants to read it and how we can get more of them. So I think that's always a compelling, argument, right? What's in it for me? And so if we can figure out and connect on that, then there's always a conversation to be had about how do we optimize that? How do we get it better?
Right. Yeah. I mean, I was going to follow up exactly about that. So I was going to ask you what, if you had suggestions for the people following us on the live stream about some best practices that really saw that worked well in the newsroom in order to convince the various departments of the value of this. You just mentioned one, of course, but I was wondering if there was anything else that comes to mind that in your experience was very valuable in order to make these insights actionable for everyone in the news organization.
Yeah, I mean, I think understanding, going back to this slide, understanding what the business problem is across each of these departments. My team and I have spent countless hours across the organization having conversations with different departments and trying to understand, what KPIs are important to you, what metrics actually are you trying to drive, right? For audience growth, it might be trying to grow our loyal user base. For product, it's trying to increase engagement and retention. For advertising team, of course, it's focused on revenue, but also, how to better understand our audiences and really, be able to empathize with advertisers to say, okay, hey, I'm this particular brand. I want to reach this type of user. Do you guys have them? And for our advertising team to actually be intelligently capable of speaking to, yes, we do have this audience. In fact, we have millions of them. Here's how you can reach them through these types of articles, through this type of content, through these types of channels. That gives them a lot more, I guess, a lot more agency, a lot more independence, and a lot more, I guess, ownership of the data itself.
Okay. There's another question following up that I should also be able to show on screen from Johannes, so you should see it too. So the question is the AI who came up with the actual 6 personas, or how much tweaking did you need to do in order to get to those personas?
That's a great question. So we actually used k-means clustering, and we iterated from 4 through, I think, 15 or 16. And so we actually have 3 clusters by nature, right? We have our flyby readers, we have our regular, and we have our loyal. The short answer to your question is the AI actually, well, the machine learning came up with it, and we ran this against several models to figure out whether 6 was optimal or not. And we landed on 6 because several models actually confirmed that 6 was the optimal number of clusters. And of course, we have to combine that with business practicality too. So we wanted to make sure that, okay, if we're going to communicate this to editorial and we send them 15 different groupings, everybody's going to get quite confused with any team, actually, not just edit. I don't mean to pick on editorial. 15 is too many to remember, but 6 is very easy. It's enough to I can rattle them off the top of my head. So it needs to be memorable as well. So I think there's a balance of machine learning logic as well as business logic, but thankfully they both landed at a happy medium. So that's how we got to 6.
Good, good. I mean, everybody likes to pick on editorial, so I don't think you're the first one doing it in any context. I mean, so many questions to choose from, so I'm just going to pick another one from the YouTube feed. There were a few questions, so I'm picking this one as representative of them, about the data that you needed in order to do all of this and how you get, basically how you get the data. And this specific question from Alexander is how you were able to connect the social demographic and usage data, especially for the readers that are not subscribers. Is it based on cookie or anything else?
Yep. So I should actually charge one of our vendors for giving them this free promotion here. But we use a platform called 1+X, which is a first-party audience segmentation tool. So that enables us to actually take we have surveys, quizzes, and polls that are actually embedded throughout our site and throughout the user experience. So obviously there's actually a very small number of users that answer these questions, but that's enough to actually get us a significant representation of what our users are doing. So we might ask questions that actually answer multiple questions, right? With one answer. So saying something like, do you enjoy vacationing with your children? And whether they say yes or no, that might answer whether they have kids and whether they want to, perhaps when they took their last trip or whatnot. So there's ways to ask questions that are that kind of answer multiple demographic questions. What we do with that then through 1+X is leverage machine learning to actually look at similar behaviors across different users and really apply that same to basically apply a machine learning generated guess to what those other users' behaviors are. So we might say, okay, based on this user's behavior, we know that they're male between the age of 35 and 45 because they're reading, I'm stereotyping a little bit here, forgive me, they're reading sports content, right? They're reading football content. So, and they came through this particular channel from this referral site. So we can basically use that platform to imply what the user demographics are across almost all of our users, actually.
That's very interesting, and it feeds on a question that I actually had at the beginning, especially when you were speaking about subscription potential. And there was also another question, I think, on Telegram from Tom, if I'm not wrong, about maybe if you could tell us a little more about the technical details that actually get you to define those scores, the subscription potential. And now I'm blanking, to be honest, on the second score that you mentioned at the beginning of the presentation. But if you could add a little bit more details about that, I think that's what we're looking for.
Sure. So the subscription potential is actually, we thankfully have some subscription data now after having a live subscription plan for the past, 4 or 5 months now. Seems a lot longer to me than that, but it's only been 4 or 5 months. So that is actually based on actual data. We know that these types of personas are actually subscribing at a higher rate based on their actual subscription out of the cohort. The engagement level is the other score. The engagement score is something that we'll touch on a little bit more during the cohort presentation on Thursday. But this is a combination of recency, frequency, and volume. So RFV, as it's popularly known. And again, I don't want to spoil the presentation on Thursday, but we could talk about that a little bit more. So we also combined the engagement score and the subscription potential into how we look at these users.
Excellent, thank you. Alexander had a follow-up from the previous question. I'm sorry that I noticed it just now, so we're going back to that one. He's asking if you're actually able to predict, for example, the gender of a user from their behavior when you don't have the social demographic information directly from your users.
Yes, it's probabilistic. So through this platform, 1+X, we're actually able to do that. So provided that we have self-declared gender information on a certain percentage of our users, we can use their behaviors to basically predict, and it's obviously not 100% accurate, but with some degree of accuracy, what gender group they fall into.
And I guess this is my personal follow-up. What other like inferred information about your user, other than the gender, have proven especially useful to get to the definition of those personas?
I actually think the propensity, their preferences, their interests are actually much more interesting than just their gender, right? So understanding like what demographic or what industry they work in, right, is really important, because that tells us why they're reading us, right? If they work in education versus government versus technology, even these three are kind of generalized into one group, but we actually know for a lot of our users which industry they work in, right? Whether that's self-declared, they actually came to an event and told us, hey, I work in this particular industry and I'm attending this for this reason, or it's implied, right, from through machine learning. That actually gives us quite a bit of information. Or I'm really into K-pop. I have this inclination for football. So understanding what their preferences are is actually really helpful to us understanding what they want to read and what they're interested in.
Mm-hmm. The K-pop examples actually seems to have captured the imagination of us.
K-pop captures all our imaginations, I think.
Yeah, of course. So there's a question specifically related to that from Lynn on Telegram about specifically young readers, that for most newsrooms is a segment that is very challenging to involve and engage. Do you have any specific insights about how this persona modeling refined your strategy, or helped the newsroom refine the strategy towards that segment and maybe that the users that fall into that persona category?
Yeah, I think we're still working through that strategy now, right? I think K-pop content is something that is highly sought after right now. So that's something we're seeking to, one, create more of, but also understand those users in a more meaningful way. A lot of those users only come in a few times right now. So I think we will also want to build a more loyal reader base through that. So I think that those are some of the challenges we're still trying to figure out, right? How do we build a loyal audience around that particular topic? Because we see a lot of traction there and a lot of potential there. So I think it's just a matter of figuring out how we engage that demographic. Most of those readers tend to skew a bit younger. They tend to skew also more female than male, actually, and so there's a different type of engagement medium. Perhaps we're not sharing through the right channels. Perhaps we should do it on Telegram rather than Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, right? So maybe taking a non-traditional approach about where we push out that content, how we're engaging with them, how we build loyalty, and we have to think through all of those things.
No, I actually, as you were speaking before and related to this, I found it personally extremely interesting, the attention to detail that went into this. For example, from the localizing the sharing buttons geographically to change to what social media is most used in different parts of the world from your segment of population. So it sounds like a mind-blowing attention to detail from the entire team that was able to work on this.
So, no, credit for that goes to our product team.
Yeah, exactly. That's the kudos to the team from my side. So I think we have 5 more minutes, so we can take a couple of more last questions. So if you have any burning questions as you're listening us, make sure to drop it ASAP. I have one from Nick that I'm gonna fill in now. Of course, we understand that you are still in experimental phase of this, that the process started already not so long ago. But Nick was asking if the personas model per se is limited. So he was curious if you're looking at sub-personas, especially in blocks that are most important for you as you move forward with your experimentation.
Yeah, for sure. I think within the Inquisitive Professional group, I think there's a lot of potential to actually break this down, even within education and finance, which are the two areas which we highlighted. I think there's lots of subgroups within that. Obviously, those are two huge sectors. And what they're reading is also very interesting, even within finance, right? There's lots of different verticals. Within education, there's lots of different, there's not only the different tiers of education, but what types of education. Is it private? Is it public? Is it university level? Is it secondary, primary? So I think yeah, really breaking this down into subgroups is that one as one example, but I think several of these can probably be broken down into many smaller subgroups. So yes, there's definitely room for that, and I think certainly this is a first iteration, and what you're seeing here is a first model, and we will certainly continue to iterate on this over time.
I guess in the second edition of the festival, 1 year from now, we will bring you back to more about the developments. So I think there's another question on Telegram before we wrap up, which again relates to K-pop. Dimitri is asking, how do you balance these specific choices with the image of a brand? I guess he's telling about his personal experience of getting a message about K-pop as one of the first one that appears as he opened the app, and it sounds like K-pop is not really what he was looking for from SCMP. So how do you manage this thing of having, of course, users with so many different expectations?
Yeah, that's tough. I think clearly we don't have it down right. Otherwise, he would have gotten the content he wanted, right? Sorry, Dimitri. We'll continue to work on that. No, but I think in all seriousness, it is something that we do need to continue to iterate on, right? It's a model that's not perfect. I think models are constantly being refined and constantly being improved, and that's proof that we still have a lot of work to do. So that's the short answer, I think.
That's good. So I will end by maybe asking you to expand a little bit on the short answer in terms of what are the next steps in this experimentation that you are most looking forward to because of the value that they might bring to the newsroom?
Yeah, I think looking at these personas in a more sub-segmented level, it will be quite interesting to better understand them. Really having additional conversations with our newsroom to help validate whether or not these personas make sense. I think our editors, as much of a hard time as I give them, they're brilliant, and they know a lot of times their intuition, their gut, is actually validated through a lot of what we do as well. So we'll see the data actually match up to their intuition, and those are the moments where I think it's kind of beautiful in a way, right? Sometimes it's a "I told you so" moment from their side, but at the same time, it's it's like, oh, they actually do understand our readers and have a certain degree of empathy with who's reading them. So I think that level of connection is really important, and continuing to either affirm or even in the case that it doesn't match up, right? That's okay too, right? How do we improve upon that? And it's about having that conversation. So I think as long as there's an open channel of communication and humility on both sides to really learn from one another. I'm learning from them, and they're learning from us about personas and about what our users are actually doing. Then I think it creates for a very collaborative and fun place to be.
And that sounds very encouraging, because I take from this experience that the collaboration is not just between the different people in different departments of the newsroom, but it sounds like a very good example also of a collaboration between the humans, so you all in the various teams, and the algorithms and the models and the information that they provide. So I guess this sounds like a good message to end on, as a very good example, same as the case study we had yesterday from Ojo Publico, of really examples of how what we're trying to show here, that really machine learning and AI-related technologies are really helping newsrooms to get better insights that allow them to improve what they do, but allow the journalists, the people in the newsroom, the humans, to improve what they do with the AI insights. So I think this is a wonderful point to end on. Korey, thank you so much for the presentation in general, for doing it at such late time in California. That's extremely appreciated. And as you said, we are looking forward to the presentation of your collab team on Thursday, where we will dive a little deeper on the experiments you have run together with other newsrooms from across the world about these specific topics. So Korey, thank you very much.
Thanks for having me.